Welcome to Real Talk, where I give real answers to real questions from real worship leaders. If you are a real worship leader with a real question and you want a real answer, head right here and submit your question for a future episode. Got some good questions this week? Let's talk about it. The first question I got was about sound in the church, and I thought, who better to ask about a sound question than our friends over at Churchfront? So I sent a little email over to Luke Jackson from Churchfront, and here's the question, and here's his answer.
What do I do if people say our music is too loud? I think this is a great question and something that I think mix engineers in the church are facing all the time. And so I'm glad to spend some time dialoguing about it today. One of the first things I would say in a response to this question is to the leader or the mix engineer at front of house, which is we want to understand first what is going on and what that person means when they bring that concern to us. And so one of the best books I've ever read as a leader is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And in that book, one of the key concepts that I took away for a ministry context that I could immediately apply is seek first to understand and then to be understood. So oftentimes we can feel very personally attached to the mixing work that we've done on a Sunday morning or during a service to make the mix sound full and to encourage people to participate without it feeling so quiet that you might hear your own voice and become self-conscious. But we also don't want to be too loud so that people can't hear the saints singing along with them. And this is a balance. This is a tension that we live in as mix engineers all the time. We've done a lot of hard work gain staging, we've done channel processing with EQ and compression, we've looked at our effects, and we've talked about the EQ on our effects returns, and we've spent a lot of time trying to make sure that the mix sounds great and that it encourages worship. So when somebody comes up to us and brings a concern about the volume level, it feels kind of like a personal attack, even though it's not, and we can take it personally. We can take it as an offense. We can feel like they don't understand. They have no regard for how much work we've put in this morning to the mix itself, and they're just concerned about that one minor issue of the volume over all things. And in reality, it could be part of the mix engineer's responsibility for that. It could also be that the band was really cranking that morning and they got really into the mix or into the song that they were playing. And so it can feel like kind of a toss-up moment in responsive opportunities, whether or not to respond with defensiveness and try to protect what we've done and our efforts, or it can be an opportunity to understand and invite in so that we can build up the body for the sake of edification in worship. So a couple things I would say to that: seek first to understand, then to be understood. So we have a great opportunity when somebody brings a concern about volume to invite them in. And so I would start with step number 1 is thank them for bringing it to your attention. You can say a genuine thank you to them as a start to the conversation. If we start with thankfulness, it really does show the fact that that person brought the concern. It does show that they care. It shows that they are thinking about the environment. It shows that they're thinking about how somebody would experience a worship service in your church. And so you can take some of these notes and really consider what a new guest might feel, or what a person in that specific age range might feel with the level of volume in your services. So you can genuinely thank them for bringing it to your attention and for their care for the experience in the worship service. That can get the conversation started. And then step number 2, I would ask them if they have time to give you a little bit more detail. You can briefly describe that volume is a massive conversation and there are a lot of nuances to it. So you'd like to learn more in effort and in line with seeking first to understand, not to be understood. So once we understand what they mean by the mix is too loud or the music is too loud, you can get better clarity on whether or not this means that the band is physically playing too loud. Maybe they're sitting in a close proximity to the stage and maybe you don't have proper amplification or treatment in the room. And so they're getting a lot of the acoustic noise from the drums, or maybe they're getting a lot of a lot of feedback or maybe a harsh frequency in a certain area based on where they're sitting if your room is not properly treated or tuned. And so you can ask some of those probing questions to get more clarity about what they mean by the music is too loud. Is it the mix and the PA is pumping too loud? Is the band is playing too loud? Or maybe there's a certain frequency in the room that could be causing their discomfort. So I would probe more again in efforts to seek to understand their situation and what they mean. Help them know that you are in efforts to understand the terms and what they mean by the terms that they're using. When they say the music is too loud, that could mean a lot of things. So you want to, before you start to strategize on ways to adjust or comfort or educate that person, we can definitely take time to really understand the terms that they're using for what they mean by the music is too loud. So this can come in a really, when it comes passively in a connect card or a prayer card, or maybe a note or an email to like a pastor and your direct report tells you that they got a complaint. That's a real passive way, and there's not a lot we can do about it. But I would encourage anybody listening to this, if you get a direct comment, person to person, face to face, in-person interaction, there is so much opportunity here for building up the body. You might educate that person on some of the kind of basic principles that you're using to record your decibel level readings in the room. You might show them that you have a microphone that you're registering through Smart or something like that shows you a decibel reading. You can show them some of the kind of standards of what you're shooting for at any given time. And again, I believe that all PAs kind of have a sweet spot where they really sing. They don't have that feeling of being too loud, but it also doesn't feel too quiet. If a PA feels too quiet, there really is an opportunity for just as much distraction on the quiet end as it does on the loud end. So we want to find that sweet spot in the middle. And if you haven't tested that with virtual sound check and backing tracks, then I would encourage you to do so that you kind of have a good range to shoot for, because every room is different. And I've heard amazing mixes sub 90 decibels. And I've also heard really bad mixes at sub 90 decibels. So there's opportunity there to have a really amazing mix at 88 and then be able to have some headroom to move that fader a little bit and drive it in the moment as the service kind of ebbs and flows. So I would encourage you that if somebody's approaching you face to face, there's so much opportunity to invite them into the process, to explain some of the things that you do in order to kind of craft a good environment for people to worship. And I would encourage you to have a reason for everything you're doing. Be intentional with what you're doing. If you have not sat down and kind of written out or typed out a philosophy of mixing in your space for your worship services and why you mix a certain way, why are the vocals forward in the mix at all times? Why are the drums at a certain level? What reason are you shooting for with your SPL in the room? Is your goal to make people feel like they can't hear themselves at all so that they can sing as loud as they want, even if they have a bad voice? Or are you aiming to really keep the PA at a level where you can hear all of the congregation singing and you're not drowned out by the band? Those are some of the questions to process through, to sit down with your pastor and talk through, or direct report. It's also something that you should write out so that you have kind of an explanation for why you do what you do. The last recommendation I'll make is a great book by Simon Sinek called Start With Why. And this really helps leaders reverse engineer the reasoning behind what they do. And if you have a bunch of tactics and strategies in your mixing approach, but you don't know why you're doing them, it's going to be really hard and difficult to engage your congregation with any of these conversations, because you're not going to have a reason, not a defense, but you're not going to have a reason or a philosophy behind what you do. So I'd encourage you to start with why and really have a reason behind every mixing decision that you make and what it contributes to the ultimate goal of the mission and vision of your church. So I hope that helps. That's how I would answer the question or the complaint that the music is too loud. hope that helps you in your leadership journey. And thanks for having me on.
Thanks so much for your answer, Luke. If you haven't heard of Churchfront before, you got to check them out. They've got a great YouTube channel where they talk about a lot of worship leading stuff and also a lot of the tech side of leading worship. So I'll link their channel down in the description below. You can also check out their website, churchfront.com. Working at a small congregation with only a few musicians, namely 2 piano players, one of which can also play guitar. I could use click tracks, but they tend to be really expensive. What ways can we vary things? I guess the question I would start by asking is, do you need to vary things? Do things need to be different every Sunday to try to keep them engaging and exciting? I think there's a case to be made that in terms of pursuing our craft, getting better at what we do, we want to be getting better at our instruments. I don't know if that equates to having to change things up musically every single Sunday, because at that point then it's like we think that we need music in and of itself to make worship exciting and interesting on Sunday. And if you've been following my channel for the past however long, then you know that that's not really my theology of what we do when we gather together for corporate worship. There's a lot of other things that go into corporate worship, and I know that you probably weren't even like looking at it from that perspective. You were just like, I'd kind of like to change things up and make it sound different because I'm bored or something. I mean, why do we do this? Well, let's talk about why we come to this conclusion. Number one, we're bored and we're like, it's just a piano and a guitar, and it's kind of boring, and we're just playing these songs, and there's not really that much we can do, we tell ourselves. And so I want to change it up and do something exciting, and like maybe I could add tracks. Maybe, I mean, if you don't have any other musicians, I'm not really sure what else you can do, but you're bored. So that's the first reason that we think this way. The other reason that we think this way is we see all of these other churches with big bands, and maybe they're doing things different every week because they're a church of 500 people and they've got a cello one week, and then the next week they're like, let's just strip it back to an acoustic set. And then the next week they've got a full band with 3 electric guitar players. Don't compare yourself to other churches, because our worship is not contingent upon how many musicians we have in our band or how exciting the arrangements are or anything like that. Once again, we want to do things with excellence, but I'm trying to break you out of this mindset of like, things are boring, or I see other churches doing all these crazy things and I need to do that too. So here's what I would tell you. Stop worrying about it. First of all, it's not really the goal of what we're doing, and the attention that you put towards there, I'm speaking from experience because I used to put so much attention on that sort of question. The attention that you're putting there could be so much better spent on other areas of worship leading. Once again, not that we never focus on that, and we're going to focus on it a little bit here. I'm actually going to tell you some things to do, but I just, overall picture, we tend to put 90% of our attention on music and tech and things like that. And when's the last time that you sat down and read a book about worship leading and it didn't feel like a task that you had to do, but it was actually something that you wanted to do? What if we spent 80% of our time studying the Word? What if we spent our time studying what corporate worship should look like and not just the musical side of things? What if we spent time planning our speaking transitions by using Scripture to speak between songs and having the Word of God interlaced, interspersed all throughout our service so that the primary thing of what we did on Sunday was all flowing from the Word of God? These are some of the things that you can focus on. Now, when it comes to this, let's answer your question. When it comes to this, you said you had 2 piano players and one of them can play guitar. If it were up to me, I don't see why you would need 2 piano players. I guess one could play like a pad sound or something, and the other one could play the actual keyboard piano sound, like a normal piano sound. It seems strange to me to have like dueling pianos leading worship. So I think my preference would be have a guitar player, have a piano player, because a guitar can serve more as the rhythmic instrument, and then the piano can fill in the other areas of the sonic spectrum, and then the piano player can play melody and lead lines and stuff like that in the left hand. This is my left hand. And then you've also got the bass notes down here in the right hand. So you've got the top end and the bottom end, and then the guitar can sit in the middle, and it can provide a more rhythmic sense to the music because it's more scratchy. So honestly, what I would say is your situation is sufficient. What you have is good enough. You don't need to worry about changing things up all the time to keep it fresh and exciting. I think that that's a trap that we fall into. Can we do that sometimes? Yes. It's not necessarily bad to do that, but I wouldn't spend my whole life trying to figure out how to vary the two instruments that we have, because there's only a certain amount of combinations that you can do. And our job as worship leaders, this is what I didn't say in the video yet, our job as worship leaders, musical worship leaders, is to facilitate the singing of our church. So in some ways, a simpler setup is better at doing that because there's less to distract people. I'm not saying that bigger setups can't do that. I'm just saying if your primary goal is to get the people of your church to sing together, glorifying God and edifying each other, then you can do that with a huge band, but you can also do it with a keyboard player, and that's it. Or a keyboard player and a guitar player. Oh, I just remembered that not too long ago I put out a video about how to arrange a worship song, and I think that it will be useful to you thinking about how the different musical parts work together. I can't really get into all of that in this video, but I'll link that video down in the description below. It's like 3 easy steps to arranging a worship song, and I think you'll learn a lot from that video. Now, if you want to learn about things other than just the musical side of leading worship, I put together a free audio training called 5 Tips to Instantly Improve Your Worship Leading. In that audio training, I give you 5 super simple things to do before you lead this Sunday or while you're leading this Sunday that will instantly improve your worship leading, and I'm pretty sure that none of them have to do with musicality. They're all the spiritual side of leading worship. So if you're interested in that, I'll link that down in the description below as well. Other than that, thanks so much for joining me today. Until I see you in the next video, keep leading worship well.